Operation Flash was a brief Croatian army offensive conducted against forces of the self-declared Republic of Serbian Krajina from 1 to 3 May 1995. The offensive occurred in the later stages of the Croatian War of Independence and was the first major confrontation after ceasefire and economic cooperation agreements were signed between Croatia and the RSK in 1994. The last organized RSK resistance formally ceased on 3 May, with the majority of troops surrendering the next day near Pakrac, although mop-up operations continued for another 2 weeks. Operation Flash was a strategic victory for Croatia, resulting in the capture of a 558 square kilometer salient held by RSK forces centered in and around the town of Okučani. The town, which sat astride the Zagreb-Belgrade motorway and railroad, had presented Croatia with significant transport problems between the nation's capital Zagreb and the eastern region of Slavonia, as well as between non-contiguous territories held by the RSK. The area was a part of United Nations Confidence Restoration Operation Sector West under the United Nations Security Council peacekeeping mandate in Croatia. The attacking force consisted of 7,200 HV troops, supported by the Croatian Special Police, arrayed against approximately 4,500 RSK soldiers. In response to the operation, the RSK military bombarded Zagreb and other civilian centers, causing 7 fatalities and injuries to 205. 42 HV soldiers and Croatian policemen were killed in the attack and 162 wounded. RSK casualties are disputed. Croatian authorities cited the deaths of 188 Serb soldiers and civilians, with an estimated 1,000–1,200 wounded. Serbian sources, on the other hand, claimed that 283 Serb civilians were killed, contrary to the 83 reported by the Croatian Helsinki Committee. It is estimated that out of 14,000 Serbs living in the region, 2/3 fled immediately, with more following in subsequent weeks. By the end of June, it is estimated that only 1,500 Serbs remained. Subsequently, the personal representative of the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Yasushi Akashi, criticized Croatia for mass violations of human rights, but his statements were refuted by the Human Rights Watch and to some extent by the United Nations Commission on Human Rights rapporteur Tadeusz Mazowiecki. Background: the 1990 revolt of the Croatian Serbs was centered on the predominantly Serb-populated areas of the Dalmatian hinterland around Nin, parts of the Lika, Kordun, Banovina regions, and in eastern Croatian settlements with significant Serb populations, as well as parts of western Slavonia centered on Pakrac and Okučani. In the early stages of the Log Revolution, tens of thousands of Serbs fled from Croatian-controlled cities, leading to the formation of a single political entity known as the Republic of Serbian Krajina. The RSK's proclaimed intention to integrate politically with Serbia was viewed by the Croatian government as an act of rebellion. By March 1991, the conflict had escalated to war, the Croatian War of Independence. In June 1991, with the breakup of Yugoslavia, Croatia declared its independence, which came into effect on 8 October after a 3-month moratorium. From late October to late December 1991, the HV conducted operations Okost-10 and Orkan-91, recapturing 60% of RSK-occupied Western Slavonia, resulting in Serbs fleeing from the area, while some were killed in a death camp in Pakrac-Apojana. A campaign of ethnic cleansing was then initiated by the RSK against Croatian civilians, and most non-Serbs were expelled by early 1993. After the end of the war, thousands of civilians murdered by the Serb troops were exhumed from mass graves. As the Yugoslav People's Army increasingly supported the RSK and the Croatian police was unable to cope with the situation, the Croatian National Guard was formed in May 1991. The ZNG was renamed the Croatian Army in November. The establishment of the military of Croatia was hampered by a United Nations arms embargo introduced in September. The final months of 1991 saw the fiercest fighting of the war, culminating in the Battle of the Barracks, the Siege of Dubrovnik, and the Battle of Vukovar. The western Slavonia area became the scene of a JNA offensive in September and October aimed at severing all transport links between the Croatian capital, Zagreb, and Slavonia. Even though the HV managed to reclaim much territory gained by the JNA advance in Operations Outcast 10 and Orkan 91, it failed to secure the Zagreb-Belgrade motorway and railroad significant for the defense of Slavonia. In January 1992, the Sarajevo Agreement was signed by representatives of Croatia, the JNA and the UN, and fighting between the two sides was paused, ending the series of unsuccessful ceasefires. United Nations Protection Force was deployed to Croatia to supervise and maintain the agreement. The conflict largely passed on to entrenched positions and the JNA soon retreated from Croatia into Bosnia and Herzegovina, where a new conflict was anticipated, but Serbia continued to support the RSK. HV advances restored small areas to Croatian control through Operation Maslenica, and as the siege of Dubrovnik was lifted, Croatian towns and villages were intermittently attacked by artillery or missiles. Cities in the RSK were also fired on by Croatian forces. The Republika Srpska, Serb-held territory in Bosnia and Herzegovina, was involved in the war in a limited capacity. Through military and other aid to the RSK, occasional air raids launched from Banja Luka, and most significantly through artillery attacks against several cities. The HV deployed to Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially in a campaign against the Bosnian Serbs. The intervention was formalized on the 22nd of July 1995, when Croatian President Franjo Tudjman and the Bosnian President, Alija Izetbegović, signed split agreement on mutual defense, permitting the large-scale deployment of the HV in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That drove back Bosnian Serb forces and came within striking distance of Banja Luka. Prelude. The March 1994 Washington Agreement ended the Croat-Bosniak War and created conditions for provision of U.S. military aid to Croatia. Croatia requested U.S. military advisors from the Military Professional Resources Incorporated to provide training of civil-military relations, program and budget services of the HV the same month, and the MPRI training was licensed by the U.S. Department of State upon endorsement from Richard Holbrooke in August. The MPRI was hired because the UN arms embargo was still in place, ostensibly to prepare the HV for NATO Partnership for Peace program participation. They trained HV officers and personnel for 14 weeks from January to April 1995. It was also speculated that the MPRI also provided doctrinal advice, scenario planning and U.S. government satellite information to Croatia. MPRI and Croatian officials dismissed such speculation. In November 1994, the United States unilaterally ended the arms embargo against Bosnia and Herzegovina, in effect allowing the HV to supply itself as 30% of arms and ammunition shipped through Croatia was kept as a transshipment fee. The U.S. involvement reflected a new military strategy endorsed by Bill Clinton since February 1993. In 1994, the United States, Russia, the European Union and the UN sought to replace the 1992 peace plan drafted by Cyrus Vance, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary-General, which brought in the UNPROFOR. They formulated the Z4 plan giving Serb majority areas in Croatia substantial autonomy. After numerous and often uncoordinated development of the plan, including leaking of its draft elements to the press in October, the Z4 plan was presented on 30 January 1995. Neither Croatia nor the RSK liked the plan. Croatia was concerned that the RSK might accept it, but Croatian President Franjo Tudman realized that Slobodan Milosevic, who would ultimately make the decision for the RSK, would not accept the plan for fear that it would set a precedent for a political settlement in Kosovo, allowing Croatia to accept the plan with little possibility for it to be implemented. The RSK refused to receive, let alone accept the plan. In December 1994, Croatia and the RSK made an economic agreement to restore road and rail links, water and gas supplies and use of a part of the Adria oil pipeline. Even though a part of the agreement was never implemented, the pipeline and the 23.2-kilometre section of the Zagreb-Belgrade motorway passing through RSK territory around Okukani were opened, shortening travel from the capital to Slavonia by several hours. Since its opening, the motorway section became of strategic importance both to Croatia and the RSK in further negotiations. The section was closed by the RSK for 24 hours on the 24th of April, in response to increased control of commercial traffic leaving the RSK-held territory in the eastern Slavonia, likely increasing Croatian resolve to recapture the area through military action. The controls were put in place by the United Nations Security Council Resolution 981 of 31 March 1995, establishing the United Nations Confidence Restoration Operation Peacekeeping Force instead of UNPROFOR, and tasked the force with monitoring of Croatian international borders separating the RSK-held territory from Yugoslavia or Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as facilitating the latest Croatia-RSK ceasefire of 29 March 1994, and the December 1994 economic agreement. The situation worsened again on 28 April, when a Serb was stabbed by a Croat refugee, both of them living in the same village before 1991, at a filling station adjacent to the motorway, situated in Croatian-controlled territory near Nova Gradiška. In response, a group of Serbs, including a brother of the killed man, fired on Croatian vehicles on the motorway, which remained open despite a UNCRO request to Croatia to close the route. 3 civilians were killed in the shooting and RSK soldiers arrested 5. The shooting stopped by 1 a.m., and the 5 were released in the morning, and the UNCRO demanded that the motorway be reopened. The RSK 18th Corps and the Chief of Police in Okukani declined on instructions from the RSK leadership in Nin, but later agreed to reopen the road on 1 May at 6 a.m. However, the decision to reopen the motorway was cancelled on 30 April at 8 p.m. the same night. 3 rocket-propelled grenades were fired into the Croatian-controlled part of Pakrac, and a vehicle was attacked on the Pakrac-Požega road located close to RSK positions, the latter resulting in 1 dead and 1 captured civilian. Hrvoje Saranic, an advisor to Tudman, confirmed that Croatia contemplated staging an incident which would provoke a military capture of the motorway area, but he also denied that one was needed as incidents were known to occur on a regular basis. Order of battle. The HV General Staff developed a plan to recapture the RSK-held area of Western Slavonia in December 1994. The forces were set to converge on Okukani, advancing east from Novska and west from Nova Gradiška, isolating RSK forces remaining north of the line while they are pinned down by reserve infantry brigades and home guard regiments. A part of the main force would secure the area south of the main axis of the attack, reaching the Sava River in order to prevent any reinforcements sent by the Army of Republika Srpska from reaching the area. The plan included Croatian Air Force airstrikes on the only Sava River bridge in the area, located between Stara Gradiška and Gradiška. In the second phase of the offensive, a mop-up operation was designed to eliminate any pockets of resistance left over. The HV General Staff and the HV Bjelovar Corps performed a full-scale staff and field rehearsal for Operation Flash in February. The operation was directed by the Bjelovar Corps commanded by Brigadier Luka Dzanko. Although the HV General Staff set up 3 forward command posts to allow rapid reaction by Lieutenant Generals Zvonimir Cervenko, the primary posts were in Novska and Novogradarska, under control of Major General Ivan Basarak and Lieutenant General Peter Stipetic respectively. At the time, Cervenko was acting chief of the General Staff as General Janko Bobetko was hospitalized in Zagreb. Croatia deployed 7,200 troops to conduct the attack, including elements of 3 Guards brigades and an independent Guards battalion supported by special forces of the Croatian Police and Reserve HV and Home Guard troops. The 18th West Slavonian Corps of the RSK, defending the area, was expected to have 4,773 troops at its disposal, as it ordered mobilization of the troops on 28-29 April. The move brought the 18th Corps, commanded by Colonel Lazar Babic, to strength of about 4,500 troops. An RSK commission set up to evaluate the battle claimed that some of the RSK units were not able to retrieve anti-tank weapons from UNCRO depots in Stara Gradiška and near Pakrac until after the offensive began. The weapons were stored there pursuant to the March 1994 ceasefire agreement. Nonetheless, the UNCRO did not resist the RSK troops removing the stored weapons.